Do you like gambling? What if instead of money, you could be wagering your intellect, cognitive capabilities, and your progress in your language learning journey? Well, we don't have to imagine that technology. It's already here and it's called ChatGPT. But wait a minute. I heard that AI could be useful in language learning. Otherwise, why are all of these apps marketing themselves as AI? Well, that's the thing. AI. It can be useful, but most of the time, is it actually useful? The most recent study on AI and cognition are actually presenting evidence that AI might be making us dumber. And who knows what the long-term consequences of using AI might be. And this leaves the question, could AI cause cognitive decline with long-term use? These are the questions that I am going to try to give an answer to. I'm Victor, or you can simply call me Bolton, and I feel very passionate about this topic. I might not be an expert, but I graduated from MIT with a degree in computation and cognition, and I have spent several thousands of hours learning languages. So I feel like I still have a lot to contribute to this discussion. If you enjoy what I do, you would do me a huge favor if you liked, subscribed, and left me a comment with suggestions on what other videos I should do. Doing so keeps the algorithm happy. Who's a happy girl? Who's a happy girl? And if you haven't already, please make sure to check out my video on how I independently learned Spanish in just 3 months. But now, back to the video and why I think this gambling analogy is quite illustrative. So, why is it that I feel like AI is just like gambling? You've most likely heard of the infamous MIT blackjack team, or at least you've seen the movie 21, which was inspired by it. Since 1979, the MIT blackjack team, consisting of students and alums from MIT and Harvard University, cheated millions and millions of dollars out of casinos across the US. And just like how the MIT blackjack team really understood probabilities and card counting, nowadays I feel like the people who know how to prompt engineer well and understand the inner workings of LLMs really get a massive advantage in reaping benefits like increased work productivity. If you know how to do so, you can manipulate the system to work in your favor, even though the system is designed to manipulate you. This knowledge will usually be passed on within circles from elite institutions, but what does the average person get from these systems? Oh boy. The situation here is looking really rough. These systems hook you in with promises that you too can hit the jackpot. That ChatGPT can consistently make your work more efficient and make you smarter for it. However, when we zoom out, we start to see that in the long term, we are incurring a lot of debt. And while in casinos that debt would be material, monetary, when we use AI systems, we are paying for with our cognition. You're not convinced? Well then, let's look at what MIT research has to say on this matter. This is Your Brain on ChatGPT, accumulation of cognitive debt when using an AI assistant for essay writing task. I will leave a link in the description for you to check out later. Well, I'm going to post the link when YouTube realizes that I'm actually a real person. I am not AI. Are you AI? Maybe she is. Maybe the algorithm is AI. This paper is still in its preprint version and has quite the number of limitations, like a small sample size of 54. Nonetheless, incredibly concerning. And I agree with the decisions of the authors to publish this in its non-finalized version due to the urgency of the ethical debate that we need to have on AI and its uses in education. This paper is written by MIT researcher Dr. Natalia Kosmyna, someone who I've had the pleasure and honor of having as a guest instructor in my neurotechnology class at MIT. The research was supervised by Professor Patty Mays at the MIT Media Lab. And let me just tell you, this is an absolute beast of a paper. It has 206 pages worth of content. No? Don't you try to do it? No? 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 Don't even think about it. Don't use ChatGPT to summarize this paper for you. The authors have intentionally set down traps in the paper that will confuse AI and straight up give you wrong information in the summary. I know reading this paper in its entirety is intimidating. You can just read the introduction, the discussion, and the conclusion sections to get a general idea of what the researchers are actually doing here. In this study, they got students writing essays on topics on the SAT under different conditions. Some were allowed to use LLMs like ChatGPT. Some were allowed to use web search like Google. And some were only allowed to use their brain. The student participated in 4 sessions over the span of 4 months, and during the last session, the researchers altered the conditions slightly. Those who were initially only using their brain were now allowed to use LLMs like ChatGPT, and those using LLMs in the first 3 sessions were now suddenly not allowed to use them in the last session. The horror! During the writing of these essays, they had the students hooked up on electroencephalograms, or EEG, which basically means they had electrodes glued to their scalp, measuring the electrical activity of their brain, the way that different parts of the brain were talking to each other. I wonder, do they let people wear headphones during their EEGs? Huh. After that, they did some natural language processing to analyze the content of the essays and graded them, and they also asked behavioral questions about how the process went. The group who only used their brain had very high levels of activity in regions associated with learning and memory formation. The group who used search engines had very active visual cortices, which are located somewhere over here, meaning that they were processing a lot of visual information while they were Googling. And the LLM only group showed the overall lowest activities and lowest interconnectivities between their brain regions. And you know what the wildest findings are? When the participants using LLMs were asked to quote their own work, they just couldn't. They had a very poor idea of what they had actually written. Relying on the LLMs for their essay writing inhibited their memory formation. And finally, when the LLM-only group was asked during the 4th session to only use their brain, no outside tools, it was a struggle for them. And in the texts they produced, there was a much smaller variety of ideas than those who started out only using their brain. And I know this is a massive oversimplification of the science and the study. I am just hoping that those of you who are here for language learning and don't have a background in STEM were able to get the gist of what's generally happening. So what should be your main takeaways of this paper? And just to make sure that we are abundantly clear on the strength of the evidence, this experiment doesn't prove the following hypotheses as facts. It only provides initial evidence. First, this study suggests that early on in your writing practice, using LLMs like ChatGPT might make memory formation more shallow, while avoiding LLMs might actually be beneficial to your memory. Second, based on the outcomes of those who started out only using their brain, but for the last session were also allowed to use LLMs, based on the outcome of that last fourth session, it appears that in the beginning, doing the bulk of your work independently, only then taking advantage of positives of LLMs might actually be engaging and developing your metacognition, the awareness of what is actually going on in your head while you're engaged in a cognitively demanding task like writing an essay or learning. And lastly, the conclusion, which I think is most profound, even though so far it has the weakest evidence for it, is, and I am just going to quote the paper. This is page 141. Participants in the LLM to brain group repeatedly focused on a narrower set of ideas. This pattern reflects the accumulation of cognitive debt, a condition in which repeated reliance on external systems like LLMs replaces the effortful cognitive processes required for independent thinking. Cognitive debt differs mental effort in the short term, but results in long-term costs, such as diminished critical inquiry, increased vulnerability to manipulation, and decreased creativity.
Surprised Pikachu face.
You can tell that this has been keeping me up at night. With this background knowledge in mind, and now that we're familiar with Dr. Kosmyna's findings on AI's effect on learning, I think we are now ready to open up the discussion of what role should AI and chatbots like ChatGPT play in our language learning journey. These sections will be a mixture of facts and personal opinion and overall, as long as you're doing most of the work yourself and you're only using ChatGPT to supplement the efforts that you've already dedicated, then you shouldn't be worrying too much about whether you're shooting yourself in the foot. If you're engaged in a writing task in a foreign language or doing vocabulary and grammar exercises, an effective way of using LLMs would be to first give it your best shot, put in all of the effort that you can, and only after that ask the chatbot that you're using for suggestions on how to improve. You can even ask the language model to point out your mistakes, point out areas where you might not sound so natural. And, with Dr. Kosmyna's study arguing that metacognition could be one of the areas where LLMs can provide value, you can get the help of ChatGPT or whatever chatbot you're using by asking it to help you reflect on your internal experience as you were trying to complete these tasks. If you've made a grammar mistake, ask it a question like, hey, why do you think I made this mistake here? What concepts in the language am I confusing? A learner of the language, at what level is this mistake typical for? On the other hand, a strategy that could be harmful to your long-term learning is asking LLMs to provide an initial draft for you, because even then, if you later try to process the text and double check that it actually sounds natural and coherent, and let's be honest, it's really easy to get tempted to avoid doing that because it's already so enamoring to experience this efficiency boost and the reduced time needed to complete the task. Even with enough willpower to resist the temptation and actually do work after the initial AI draft, you are still delegating parts of your thinking process to a machine that lives outside of you. You're going into cognitive debt without realizing it, because it's very gradual and almost unnoticeable, but then at some point it will hit you. You will realize how AI has been manipulating you. I haven't personally seen this yet, but I bet that we're going to see more and more of this. It will be an increasingly common occurrence to come across language learners and maybe even self-proclaimed polyglots who are simply going to outlandishly overestimate their actual language abilities. And I know most who do so won't do this intentionally, but some language learners are going to fool themselves and genuinely start believing that because them plus AI imitates a certain level of language, that they must be at that level of language. And there's going to be one hell of a rude awakening when they actually go out into the real world. And I think it's such a shame that at every step we are encouraged to take the easy way out, because learning a language can be one of the most internally rewarding experiences, and it doesn't really matter what level in the language you reach. And there's so many benefits to foreign language learning that don't even have anything to do with the language that you're learning. It's a well-known fact at this point that along with learning to play musical instruments, learning a foreign language is one of the best methods of slowing the cognitive decline that comes along with aging. And this is just my hypothesis. AI hasn't been around for long enough, so we haven't been able to conduct studies on whether or not its excessive usage could be beneficial or harmful to the brain. But based on Dr. Kosmyna's findings and based on other studies on technology and how it affects our brain, again, just a hypothesis, I suspect that excessive usage of AI in your language learning journey might actually counteract some of these benefits that you would otherwise get in the form of protection against cognitive decline. I don't know what excessive would be in this case. I don't know what the extent would be in this case, and I don't know if it will depend on how exactly you're using AI. You could only potentially confirm or deny this with longitudinal studies of several years, maybe decades. But there have been some other studies about the effect of prolonged TV watching, many of them showing that watching TV for several hours a day can actually accelerate cognitive decline. It doesn't cause it, it accelerates it. Most disturbingly, excessive TV watching after 40 seems to completely mitigate the protective effects of exercise on the brain. And exercise is also known as one of the best ways to protect yourself against cognitive decline. And watching YouTube isn't that dissimilar to watching TV. Maybe I am now contributing to our collective brain rot. The effects of technology on society is a very complex and nuanced topic, and I feel like a lot of times we don't talk about it with the necessary level of nuance. I hope that you found this video useful, and I hope that you learned something today. I hope that at least some of you will start looking with a more critical eye at how you use technology when it comes to your language learning process and in general in your daily life. I am happy to continue this discussion in the comment section of this video, and please let me know, do you use AI when learning languages? Why do you use it? Why don't you use it? What effective strategies have you discovered that work for you? And transition. Thank you all so much for being here, and we will see you next time. Peace out.